child has gone to bed one night or another with fear or pain or loss or disappointment, and yet each of us has awakened, arisen, somehow made our ablution, seen other human beings, and said, "Morning, how are you? Fine, thanks, and you?" It's amazing. Wherever that abides in the human being, there is the nobleness of the human spirit. Despite it all, black and white, Asian, Spanish, Native American, pretty, plain, thin, fat, vowed or celibate, we rise. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom just because I walk as if I have oil wells pumping in my living room? Just like suns and like moons, with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I rise. Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries. Does my sassiness upset you? Don't take it so hard just because I laugh. As if I have gold mines digging in my own backyard. You can shoot me with your words. You can cut me with your lies. You can kill me with your hatefulness. But just like life, I'll rise. Does my sexiness offend you? Oh, does it come as a surprise that I dance as if I have diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame I rise. Up from a past rooted in pain I rise. A black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak miraculously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the hope and the dream of the slave. And so, naturally, there I go rising.
Very good evening to you and welcome to another edition of Reparations Now. This is the post-Eddie Grant era. I dub it the post-Eddie Grant era because what we have in the studio this evening is the regional representation for the Eddie Grant visits. The beautiful young lady to the extreme right is Sister Lucienne Lagadou.
Hello.
She's a teacher from New Amsterdam, one of the organizers of the New Amsterdam visit. Fantastic visit. I don't think we need to introduce this face, but because it is protocol, Brother Rear Admiral Gary Best, he was instrumental in organizing the visits to Essequibo, Berbice and Linden generally, and to his immediate left is Wazero Esther Gittings. She was instrumental in the Region 10 visit, and to her left is Brother Royston Peters, the man who was responsible for taking Brother Eddie Grant up to the Pomeroon. And so welcome. We are going to be discussing the Eddie Grant visit in a few minutes. Welcome to Reparations Now.
Thank you. Thank you.
You know, one of the things that Brother Eddie Grant spoke about was the ring bang philosophy. So we're going to apply the ring bang philosophy today, and we're going to apply that ring bang philosophy to something that was produced by the Guyana Reparations Committee. The ring bang philosophy basically says, according to Brother Eddie Grant, basically says that we should love ourselves. Love ourselves. love the things we make or create, love the things we make or create, buy from ourselves, because if you're making, then you're going to have to buy and share, and do this without oppressing anyone. So the ring bang philosophy: love yourself, love the things you make or create, buy from yourself, and do this without oppressing anyone. We're going to apply that ring bang philosophy to our little book, the Guyana Reparations Story. We're going to apply that philosophy because this is something that we created. The ring bang philosophy gives this meaning to me. This is something we created, we researched, we wrote it. And it is something we made, we created. We're supposed to love this information. We're supposed to acquire it. And we do this without oppressing anyone. There is one other thing that I would like us to, in introducing the program, focus on. In all of his visits, Brother Eddie Grant spoke to a number of issues. I recap those issues. One of the strongest points of his presentations were that not all education is education, especially for the Africans. He was strong on the education thing. He was very strong on the education issue. I think both himself and the Rear Admiral agreed in Berbice that education was information for subjugation. Information for subjugation. One of the things he argued also too is that the education that we are getting does not observe our correct history and does not teach us that we are not a homogeneous morass. It does not teach us about the differences which we possess from others. The education does not teach us that we deserve reparations as a result of the impediments we face. That education is stopping us from finding the solutions to the inequities which we face. That it results in us believing that we do not trust each other, that the non-observation of our heroes and our sheroes, and this is a position which was put forward by our chairman, Brother Eric Phillips, that a non-observation of our heroes and sheroes is resulting in our further being decentered, and which is being supported by digital misinformation. And I think this was the point that Brother Gary Best had made. One of the very interesting points that was made and which was agreed upon by Brother Gary Best also too is that the Guyanese nation is built on injustice and oppression for the Africans, that we are not a nation but an aggregation of people. And as a consequence, there were a number of recommendations that we have a real education, which is a community-based education, which is focused on re-establishing the consciousness of who we are, removing the stereotypes, curing the great amnesia. Eddie was strong on this point, the great amnesia, and also to removing the disconnection between the realization of our present day existence and the divine cosmic order. That we need to understand ourselves within the divine cosmic order. And I'll take two other recommendations. That reoperationalizing the divine cosmic order replaces our true being, and that the missing factor which is responsible for our reconnection and our resurgence lies in our DNA. With that introduction, we're going to look at a few, graphics which advertise our book and information in the book, and then we go into a discussion of the information that we will see in the graphics, and also to the questions, a discussion on the information which was presented in the summary of Eddie Grant's visits. So, to the graphics. Yes, that is our book, The Guyana Reparations Story, which was written by the Guyana Reparations Committee. We ring banging it. It's our creation. Now, in this book, and we're selling this book, in this book, we make a fundamental argument that the evidence, the scientific evidence shows that the first people in the Guyanas is this particular face. This is the face of a woman who is named after Lucia, who is sitting here. Her name is Lucia, and she is estimated by carbon dating to have been here on the South American continent for 12,000 years, 2,000 years before the Amerindians have been here. This picture is another picture that we have got in the Guyana Reparation story of Naia. And Naia is the first North American. So the first South American and the first North American, one is a darker shade, and this one looks more like our Lucia, who's sitting in the studio here, than the other face of the other African. But these are two distinctly African features. And this is the first North American according to archaeological and DNA finds. And then we go on to, if you look at the similarity between this indigenous face and Naia's face, it tells you a little story. You see? The texture of the skin and everything. Let's go for, now, this head, the Olmec head, is a head which has been found in the South American continent. They are called the Olmec heads. And these Olmec heads bear a very close resemblance to all of us. And these Olmec heads predate the arrival of Columbus. So the question is, how these distinctly African-looking heads get on the South American continent long before Columbus coming? I mean, it was our own brother, Ivan van Sertima, who created hell to get them to release these images to the world. And some of them, when you spin them round to the back, what you do not see at the back of the Olmec heads is the braided hair and the locks. Because, they might say that, don't bother with the flat nose. It's because the head fall down, the nose flatten. And the head swell because of that kind of story. But when you look at the plaits at the back of the head, the braids, the actual locks, then you understand that this is not accidental. These are blacks. And there's a reason why we're showing this. These are the Ishango bones. And it was only today that it struck me that the ancient ancestors were extremely wise, because if they write these things on paper, the paper might be rotten. But somewhere the other day knew that baboon bones could withstand the ravages of time, so they wrote their first bits of mathematics on the Ishango bones, baboon bones, which is evidence that, we were doing maths for a very long time. And there's a reason why we're showing these things, even as we advertise our book and as we ring bang our book. This is a picture of Imhotep, the father of medicine. They tell us that Hippocrates is the father of medicine. But you know where Hippocrates learned his medicine? He learned his medicine from Imhotep, an Egyptian. And there's a reason why, again, we are saying that we are showing these things, showing these images. The next image that we have to show you is the burial mask. Now, this is one that we shall focus on. This is the burial mask of King Tut, the boy king from Egypt, who acceded to the throne at the age of 9 and ruled the Egyptian empire. 9 years old. I think he died when he was 13 years old or something of the sort like that. He did not live very late into his teens. But this is very important. It's important for our young people to see his burial mask. This is what he was buried with over his sarcophagus. And it exists till today. Brother Nippy would say that, well, you know, it is changing and that we have to be very careful because very soon we're not going to recognize the original mask. Next image, the step pyramids in Saqqara. And these step pyramids are also to be found here in South America, in Mexico, etc. But the first step pyramids were built in Saqqara in Egypt. Try as they might. Let's go back to the pyramids. Try as they might. With all of the so-called technology that they have got today, these pyramids cannot be reproduced. They cannot be reproduced. But these were built by ancient Africans.
That's the work of Imhotep.
This particular one, and then there is the Great Sphinx. The Great Sphinx, which is in the Giza Plateau. Now, behind the Great Sphinx is another pyramid, which is one of 3 pyramids in the Giza Plateau complex. It's a complex of pyramids. But the very strange thing about these 3 pyramids in the Giza Plateau complex is that they align directly with the stars in Orion's belt. The exact alignment, etc. These pyramids. And when these pyramids were built originally, they were limestoned. They coated them with limestones. The limestone which was removed by the Arabs to adorn their mosques. For miles, one was able, when the sun stood up and shone on this particular complex, one was able to see these pyramids for miles in a distance. And so they were literal stars here on earth, which were reflecting stars in the heavens. It was an engineering feat and an astronomical feat to reproduce the heavens here on earth. And so the Sphinx itself, there's a tremendous story about it, and I'll leave that for somebody else to fill in. But let's move on to any other photograph. This particular book that we are looking at here is one of the volumes which is to be found in Timbuktu. You know, there is the old story in which they said, there's the old story, if somebody wanted to say to you that you're stupid, they used to say that, oh, we're going to send you to Timbuktu. Little did we know that Timbuktu was the place of one of the first universities in Africa, long before the Moors went into Europe and established Oxford and Cambridge, etc. So universities were a part of our culture, and these books exist until today. There is a move afoot to destroy these books because, you know, there is this tremendous effort to destroy the legacy of the Africans. And let's move to this other one. Let's move to the other. We're looking for Mansa Musa, the king of Mali. Let's go forward. Oh, we don't have that one, but I go full in. I go full in on it. Inside that particular book, this book, the Guyana Reparations story, we have Mansa Musa, a picture of Mansa Musa, the richest man ever, the king of Mali, the king of the country from which those books were found, Timbuktu. It was in that kingdom. Mansa Musa, the richest man ever. Name any rich person today, Mansa Musa made them look like a boy. In fact, he was a Muslim. He was a Muslim, and he went on his pilgrimage to Mecca. This is an image of him here. We can try to get it. He went on a pilgrimage to Mecca. And on his pilgrimage to Mecca, he distributed so many gifts of gold that he set the economy of the region, the economies, in a depression. And so, why is all of this important? It is important because we are advertising the Guyana Reparations story, a book which was written by ourselves, for ourselves, to correct that miseducation that we discussed at length throughout the length and breadth of Guyana, and we did not know the significance and the importance of what we were writing. And in this book, we have shown you sufficient evidence of the greatness in the DNA of the Africans who live in Guyana today, but which the education or the miseducation does not permit us to remember that we are the father of medicine, that we have got technology, we have got evidence of technology here on this planet that is unproduced by the so-called modernism, that the divine cosmic order was used in our architecture, that we produced boy kings, etc., etc. And so we go on this odyssey. We go on this journey as we reflect on Brother Eddie and as we reflect on the Guyana Reparations story to discuss now the Berbice element of Brother Eddie's trip. The general overview of the three trips, the Linden and the Essequibo journey. And so we start with our Berbice guest. Knowledge, they say, comes from the east, but it is reborn in the west. Sister Lagadou, your reflections on Brother Eddie Grant's visit and some of the things that he would have said that may have struck you as important.
It's not an individual lightning bolt. It happened for all of us who were on the team in Berbice. And one of the most profound things he said is that the only way to eradicate suicide is for our children to look themselves in the mirror, as a matter of fact, anyone to look themselves in the mirror, and to be able to recognize the person that they see, and then to ring bang it, to love themselves, sell themselves, and own themselves. So that's one of the things we took from his visit. The second thing is that he embodies inclusion. And when I say inclusion, come back to the education aspect, because I'm a teacher and I actually live and breathe teaching, and I believe that it starts with education. But one of the people or the organizations or the bodies responsible for miseducation is ourselves. For example, I have an 8-year-old niece and she's very dark, beautiful child. So we were getting ready one day to go out and she was like, "Auntie, I'm not going because I'm not pretty enough. I need to do something to my face or whatever." So I'm like, "Why?" And she said, "Because I'm not like you, so I'm not pretty." So I like, who I started to freak out. Who told you that you're not pretty? But it starts with us. What are we teaching our children? What stories are we telling our children? This is beautiful. This is all fantastic. But what everyone else has over us is that they have had stories being told to them of persons in their history through their fairy tales and through their narratives and everything else. So it starts from you. So then if I were to ask you who you are, you stop at slavery, and then there's this big gap, and then you go to fantastic Africa. It's fragmented. The entire thing is fragmented. So what Mr. Grant taught us was to start with you. Start with yourself. Look at yourself in the mirror. I is smart, I is pretty, I is beautiful. And then you sell yourself from there. We are our own worst critics. If your hair is kinky, if your skin is too dark, we create those problems for ourselves. So that's what we took from him. Start there. Start with you.
Excellent. Brother Best.
Well, there's so much to talk about, and
Yes.
It's like Lou spoke about what she took from Eddie Grant's videos, but from Brother Eddie's talk right across the three different areas we went, Bobby, Sesikubo, and Linden. There are a lot of nuggets that came out of it, quite a lot of nuggets. And if we go back to the ring bank philosophy, you can see the ring bank philosophy is linked towards the African philosophy. For example, love yourself first. And that's an important word. Love yourself first. You must love yourself first before you can even love someone else. Love the things you make or create. Then buy the things you make or create. When you look at that, you see, you contextualize it, it is linked to African philosophy. And therefore, if it's linked to the African philosophy, it's linked to the reparations philosophy. So when I look and see land justice is reparatory justice, it's linked to that. So it's like if Brother Eddie, through the ancestors,
It's true.
was given a specific message to be included in the Guyana Reparations story, to be included in the land justice fight, and to be included in the whole reparatory justice journey we're on. So for me, I think we need to recognize the tenets of the ring band philosophy, which we just mentioned. Love yourself first. Love the things you make or create, and buy the things you make or create. And write that into the reparation story, because it is linked to the reparation story, and it's linked to the way we live, the divine cosmic order, the communal way of living.
But let me ask you a question, because you seem to gloss it over. Do you see a rewriting of the Guyana reparation story using the divine cosmic order combined with the ring bang philosophy?
I see an updating of the Guyana reparation story, not a rewriting, an updating of it. You know, just keep improving the reparation story, because I read it and it's quite unique in telling its story. So we're just going to add more stories to it. As we uncover more information, we add more stories to it. To me, it's just updating the reparation story, not rewriting the reparation story.
Excellent. Maybe I used the incorrect word. Wazero Estigatings, your reflections on Brother Eddie Grant's visit. I mean, I know you've been all over the place. You didn't missing out on nothing.
You're right, Brother Jonathan, because I did work with the Linden team, I worked with the Burbies team, and I worked with the Essequibo team to make
the Georgetown team.
To make sure that Eddie Grant's visits were orchestrated properly and successful. Well, I've been listening to Brother Eddie Grant a long time, and I know for a fact, and he pointed it out again, that the reason he can be so free and he can be so vocal about reparations, he has no fear to talk about reparations, because he has no boss. He's his own boss, he's his own man, he's independent, so he's free. Because a lot of persons are not, because of their commitments, job employment and otherwise, they aren't free to talk about reparations, which means it's ring bang again. You gotta own yourself, love the things that you make or create, sell yourself, support each other and don't oppress anybody. So Brother Eddie Grant was also instrumental in helping us to market our Guyana Reparations story. He autographed many copies along with Brother Gary Best, which we distributed at all the schools we went to, and almost every venue or discussion we had, we distributed the Guyana Reparations story. And I must let our viewers know, the public of Guyana, that we will be asking questions here. We have a competition going on in relation to the Guyana Reparations story, where we will be having segments on our monthly program, where we will be giving out questions, and we're encouraging our viewers to participate by answering through our call-in sessions. So indeed, like Brother Gary said, I think the Guyana Reparations story just needs to be updated, not rewritten.
All right, excellent. So, Brother Royston, and then when we finish with Brother Royston, we can go back to, and we can show another picture of the cover of the book. And we're selling this book today. And then we're going to go to page 9, Lucia. I'm going to read an extract, and then we're going to ring bang it.
All right, Brother Jonathan. I know you're saying we're selling the book, but don't forget, we said to our viewers over and over, this book is here for free distribution. And we've been saying that even before they arrived, because we've been feeding our audience all along about every stage about the development of this book to distribution. And I know lots of persons are looking out for their free copy. So when Brother Jonathan says selling it,
it doesn't mean you have to buy it.
It doesn't mean you have to buy it. It means you can
money.
focus on our fourth Sunday program right here, answer your questions, and get your free copy.
Well, selling is not in the context of paying a monetary price for it. Brother Royston.
All right, thank you. And a reflection on the visits with particular reference to Essequibo. When we first floated the idea of going to Essequibo, which would include the Pomeroon, because I think sometimes we speak of Essequibo and we excise Pomeroon. I learned that, Brother Eddie had never gone to the Pomeroon, and so it was with some specific focus that we insisted on ensuring that he went there, and was taken to literally our naval, the naval of Guyana. And when I say the naval, I meant the part at which we actually entered into Guyana as our grandparents when they came into Guyana and started developing this place, because that entry commenced through the Pomeroon. And so we were just a few meters off where that place is. So the first stop we made was at Hackney. We spoke with the youngsters there, including parents and teachers, and I think that was a well-received visit. And then we proceeded on along the coast to 8th of May, which is Dartmouth, another area, another village that was established and still largely owned and managed by Africans today. And we had a nice chit-chat there. Well, nice discussion on the element of reparation, of course, with the ring-bang philosophy to reparations, because the general focus of the visit was to share how do we embrace this whole aspect of concept of reparations. What does it mean to us, and how do we best take advantage of whatever is available. And of course, we use the three basic pillars, which is as we call it, international reparations, which is the repayment for labor that went for several years unpaid for by our grandparents, lots of whiplashes, lots of backs and all of that. The other element is the local reparations, where we're asking for a portion of lands that we would have civilized and became depossessed from us via the several states. And the third aspect, which perhaps is maybe the first aspect, is the self-reparations, whereby we seek to have an understanding of ourselves and to find ways by which to reorganize, reposition, and take advantage of moving ourselves forward. And I think that along the process, it became very evident that the element of self-identity is to be sought as one of the major pillars to be dealt with. And from then we can really move ourselves forward into some constructive way to build ourselves, build our communities, and obviously build a better country. I think the other significant aspect that came out was the element of building trust among ourselves to ensure that we have a safe existence and a sustained togetherness in this place called Guyana, the Caribbean, and the world at large. I think those are the principles that I recognize that really came out in a very direct and definite way. And those are the ones that I would want to really reflect on and to have us build on so that we can have a real ring banging of the reparations process for now and the indefinite future.
All right, excellent. So
it's important to mention that Brother Eddie insisted on speaking to school children. I mean, that should be highlighted, and that should be said about his own position and the audience that should be hearing about reparations as he cast it. So there was a definite plan and execution of speaking to children in Berbice, in Linden, and in Essequibo. He spoke mostly to children in the school setting, and it's a wonderful experience for them because they're going to reflect 25 and 50 years from now on that particular visit and what it did to their lives.
There was a peculiarity. I don't know, because I did not go on the Essequibo trip, but the New Amsterdam people made sure that Eddie sang wherever he went.
He sang there too.
Yes.
He sang in Essequibo also too.
Yes.
Okay, that's very interesting. So what we're going to do is that we're going to taking the initial discussion, love yourself, ring banging, the element of freedom, the Pomeroon discussions, international reparations, local reparations, self-reparations, and the issue of building trust. We're going to put all of this together in the philosophy of ring bang, and we can go back to these visual images because this is for the youths outside there. Waking up the DNA. It's a very interesting document, and I'd like to put this part of the discussion in the context of a document which is entitled How to Make a Slave by Willie Lynch. The Willie Lynch Letter, it is called. And after outlining how it is a free African could be broken into being an enslaved African and accepting himself as an enslaved African, they said, we must warn you that these people, and I'm paraphrasing, these people who we have conditioned into accepting this enslaved mentality must be kept away from any information about their culture and by extension their history.
Yep. Hence the fragmentation.
Because if their minds come into contact with any of that information, the mind has the capacity to correct and re-correct itself even without their intervention. And that in that particular context, we have lost them. And so, we're ring banging the Guyana Reparations story. When you look at the Guyana Reparations story, the Guyana Reparations story shows that information which is hidden from us, and it explains why the education that we are being given is devoid of any significant historical content, true historical content of ourselves.
Well, in actual fact, it's emerging differently because the whole reparation story and whole move for reparations changing that narrative. So what we're doing, we're unlocking the knowledge about ourselves slowly and writing it into story. So we've moved from past tense, we're now into gerund, and as we move from the emergence to resurgence. So while I agree with you, I want to say that on top of all of that, we are unlocking that knowledge that was kept from us.
Beautiful.
We are unlocking it. They attempted to and may have been successful in the past with keeping the knowledge away from us. But the reparation stories, that is unlocking the knowledge and bringing it into the fore.
Excellent. And so what we're going to do is that we're going to further unlock.
Further unlock, yes.
Lucia. Let's get the image of Lucia. Yes. So what? Yes, Lucia. And if you can read what is said alongside Lucia there from at home, you know, and I'm going to read with you. We can no longer say, it says at page 9, that the first colonizers of the Americas came from the north of Asia, as previous models have proposed, said Dr. Walter Neves, an anthropologist at the University of Sao Paulo, who made the initial discovery of this image, Lucia, in 1975, along with an Argentine colleague, Hector Pucciarelli. This skeleton, and you're not seeing this, but I'm going to continue reading. This skeleton is nearly 2,000 years older than any skeleton ever found in the Americas, and it does not look like those of Amerindians or North Asians, page 9 says. So, discussions.
Well, all right.
All right,
everybody's firing.
I think fortunate for us, this find was just in our to the south of Guyana in Brazil. And it, in a sense, indicates because at one time. The Guyanas were essentially, you had Dutch Guyana, British Guyana, French Guyana.
The Guyana Shield.
The entire shield. Brazil, Guyana, Suriname, and French Guyana. So essentially we were one land. There was no definite separation of, like, as it is today. So the fact that that discovery was made in part of on our shield, it's indicative of what existed throughout, right? And so there's no, for me, there's no essential borders that would have separated what transpired in the Portuguese Guyana as against what happened in British Guyana or Dutch or French Guyana.
But you should add to that too that South America was connected. The South American continent was connected to the African continent.
Well, certainly.
And it broke away.
Yeah.
So we have to keep that in mind. It broke away. So the history is evolving. As more information is unlocked through archaeological finds and interpretation, we're going to be discounting some of the facts we had before. And that will become uncomfortable for some people. Especially if some of those facts are discounted, people may feel as though they're being discounted. All we're doing is discounting the facts, unlocking knowledge, so that we find ourselves in a much better position to appreciate each other. True. So these are astounding facts.
True.
And it has implication for our own history and how we view ourselves.
True.
So I want to pick up on a term, on a phrase that you use, appreciate each other. The reality is that I feel that the lack of appreciation is more an issue for the African community than other communities, because being an African, I know that in the African community we appreciate
everybody.
Many other, in fact all of the
everyone.
other. We love everyone.
We love everyone.
But we have not seen that love being returned to us.
And that's what I'm saying. That is a factor, and generated by the absence of credible information. And that's what I'm saying. This information and new knowledge will eventually encourage others to recognize the importance of the African and to like and eventually love the African the way the African like and love others.
But more importantly, yes. I mean, let's look at Lucia's face again. According to Professor Walter Neves, Dr. Walter Neves, the face of the first South American. Does this make you love yourself anymore? And you know, I looking at her face a little bit, and when I look at Esther just now, I look back and I look back. So, any other comments?
All right.
Does it help you to love yourself?
Yes, of course, absolutely. It also helps to spread the love to others, because they will understand from these new facts being made public, they will understand the ground that we're standing on as Africans in Guyana, and so to speak, Guyana Reparations Committee. Now, Lucia was discovered since in 1975, but it was only a few years ago this information was made public, because they kept her hidden in the Atikovo Museum in Menes where she was found. And quite recently, that museum has been burnt. I think in this same month, this museum was burnt. The entire museum and all its artifacts were engulfed by fire. Sister
Lagadou, in your opening presentation, you said that your niece, who is darker than you, lamented that, oh, I'm not pretty. Do you think that the knowledge of the fact that, you know, you was the first woman, or evidence of your complexion being the first complexion on this continent, do you think that it would do good for your niece?
I don't think it, I know it. We have had her reading since she could speak, and one story out of maybe 150 was narrated about 2 African children in Africa, and they were heroes and they were pretty, and there was a story about somebody who looked like her. And she saved that one, and she reads it to herself over and over and over again. Because finally in a story, there I am. It's like a reflection of herself. So one thing that you said that stood out to me when you were talking about the enslaving is the acceptance. Are we willing to accept the information that we are receiving? What are we going to do with the information that we're receiving? Are we going to accept it or not? Because we had some convincing with our niece, because our family is mixed and very few of us are dark-skinned. And this is close to me because I have seen my relatives who are darker think that we who are lighter-skinned are at a better disadvantage because of our skin complexion. That's simple fact. That's very, very simple fact. And it starts with, first of all, you love yourself, and then you accept the information that you get. So we can dig, and we can dig, and we can uncover, and we can uncover, and we can evolve and evolve. But if we do not accept the information that we're receiving, there is no de-slavement.
And
for lack of a better term.
Interesting term. Use de-slavement, the enslavement. But I just want to go back to Lucia, in the context of defining and where it was held in Minister Rice. I lived as a student in Brazil for 4.5 years. And in the context of Brazil and Argentina, those 2 countries have serious difficulties dealing with the African content in that country. So the fact that Dr. Neves was able to document his find, and write about it, speaks volumes of him. But I couldn't really imagine the challenge he had within his own society, Brazilian society, and that's why it was kept hidden. He had his Argentine archaeologists. See, archaeologists find themselves in a really uncomfortable position. They find the facts, and then their sponsors may impose a different narrative concerning those facts. So it's interesting that it was done by a Brazilian. I'm sure the Brazilians will take credit, but having lived in Brazil, color is a very important part in Brazilian lifestyle. So I was almost at the bottom of the color scale. It didn't bother me. I came from Guyana. I knew who I was, and I know how powerful I am as a person. But my colleagues who went with me to Brazil, who were of lighter complexion, they were definitively treated better by the Brazilians than they treated me. But it didn't bother me. But it reflected and showed me what the kind of society, how challenging the Brazilians, blacks are in, Africans are in Brazil, in South America. So again, come back to the reparation story. The reparation story, as written, is a major step in bringing information, not education, bringing information and knowledge about our people. Because education is just really arresting information in a chronological sense. Knowledge is more important than education. This is knowledge, knowledge, and this is information concerning ourselves. So the reparation story is good, and that's the way I think we need to go.
And we bring banging.
Yes, we bring
so it's open discussion, loving ourselves.
Yes.
Loving ourselves.
How does...
All right, I needed to add I like the part that she said, what are we going to do with this knowledge that we've received? Are we going to accept it? We need to accept it and show that we accept it by complimenting our dark brothers and sisters just as much or even more to emphasize the thing as we do with the light-skinned ones, because we are the ones that make the dark-skinned persons feel they're not so beautiful, because we would compliment the light-skinned ones more. We push them in front, we use them to sell everything, and your black stay back. So we got to start doing something about that ourselves by complimenting our black skin brothers and sisters just as often and even more than the light skin.
But I was going to give you an opportunity. You're right, Don.
I have a challenge with that, and that for me, my brother. The element of colors occur to me.
We can't deny that it exists.
But I know it exists. Yes. But for me, we are brothers and sisters.
I never saw it.
And the element of
I never saw it because my entire family is mixed. When my other dark-skinned family began to feel what I feel is when I decided to go natural for the very first time and lost jobs because I went to interview with my nappy head. So I came home crying and they was like, what happened? I said, I didn't get a walk. Why make you don't get a walk? I was told that my hairstyle was not appropriate for the job. This is the second time I'm growing out my hair. The first time it was so depressing, because not only was there ridicule from people who didn't understand this, my very own people were like, in order for you to exist, in order for you to be successful, in order for people to appreciate you and respect you, you have to keep relaxing your hair. From the age of 3, because my mother wanted us to be successful, being light-skinned is not enough. So it goes deeper. It goes deeper than just skin color and the texture of the hair. We have been educated to hate ourselves.
And that's why,
even if you have a little bit of it.
And that's why the reparation story is important. That's why the stories are important, because we deal with 3 types of persons here. We have to be very careful. We have the Africans, Africans, and Afro-Saxons. So if you have Africans, they're going to do a lot of damage to the Africans, and the Afro-Saxons also will do damage. So this education information will unlock and bring more people from Afro-Saxons and Africans and bring them to Africans.
Unfortunately, the time has flown by. So what we're going to do is that we're going to wrap up. How does this help you? How does it help to understand, for instance, on page 5, in the Guyana Reparations story, where it says that Africa is the birthplace of man, how does it help you to love yourself? Ring bang. Africa is the birthplace of man. There have been many debates about Africa not being the sole source of the beginning of human life. This was put to rest when, on 18th of July 2007, an analysis of thousands of skulls showed modern humans originated from a single point in Africa. And then on page 6 it says, by tracing the Y chromosome of men, Dr. Wells showed that all human beings came from a single man who lived in Africa. How does this help you to love yourself? 1 minute each.
All right, well, I don't know about the man, but I know they found Lucy, who is 3.1 million years old. So in the Awash Valley. So in spite of what, all the propaganda and everything, I know that civilization began in Africa. Africa is the birthplace of all mankind, and black woman is the mother of creation. And out of her came all others.
And you recommend that we acquire a copy of Guyana Reparations Story?
They log on to to Reparations now, answer your question. There are lots of copies of Guyana Reparations Story floating around out there. Check us out at the Museum of African Heritage every Thursday at 5:30. We're open to the public. Get your copy of the Guyana Reparations Story and participate in our question and answers segments right here on the fourth Sunday of every month.
30 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 seconds.
I'll see my time to, please, I'll see my time to.
1 minute, 30 seconds.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
In terms of owning my identity, while growing up, it ended for me at slavery. Like, okay, my ancestors were slaves. And then it stopped there. And then as I grew and the information became available and I accepted the information, I saw kings, I saw queens, I saw potential, and then I saw success. So that is what it meant to me.
I can take 15 seconds because I want to get this in. Black Rasta came to this country and he gave us a story of enslavement. Brother Eddie said, you know, when I sit down and I think about this thing, you know is what happened? They come and they friend we, and they said, look, give me some laborers, we want to send them down. And they came 2 times. And when they went back, our kings in Africa asked, but we sent some people, where are they? And then the next time that they came with guns. Historical research says you must be able to substantiate your story from 2 independent sources. If Black Rasta came from Ghana and said that is what happened, and Brother Eddie sit down here and think about the whole thing and say, they're friendly and this is what they're doing, there must be some credence in that particular story. I just wanted to push that in. It helps us to love ourselves more, I think. Brother Ryson, we didn't sell ourselves. We were beaten into this.
True. Yeah, I recognize that principally knowledge of self is essential for any growth or development. And I'm speaking from a personal standpoint in that I had a lot of sojournings to get to where I am today, wrestling all sorts. But principally, and strange enough, it was a gentleman from a village called Deventer Castle on the Esco Coast who spoke to me at a wake in Festival City. And he said to me, young man, you need to improve on your spirituality. Couldn't understand what it meant. And he said, talk to your priest. And so I went to, my priest at the time was Jericho Rayside. And I asked him, you know, and he gave me a little response. And I was lost. But I started then sorting myself out. And ever since then, I was able to navigate some pathways and really got some responses. And that has taught me a lesson. So much so that now my focus is on helping youngsters, primarily primary students and secondary if I could, in trying to understand themselves, identify themselves as they are within the space of they find themselves, within the universe, and in every proximate area that they are. And so part of what we're doing now, and I have a sister who's working on that concept as well, is looking at what we call selfhood education. How do we understand ourselves in this context, in this space called the world or Guyana or the earth? And there's places out there to understand yourself so you can really grow and become somebody. That fundamentally will help us to appreciate ourselves as who we are and take ourselves forward.
Anybody would like to wrap up on the Guyana Reparations story?
Well, I think the document, the book we have before us is a 4-in-1 book, and I would really recommend that all try to have a copy of it, read it, understand it, and if there's need to seek any kind of clarification, there are persons will enable to do that for you. But I think fundamentally it paints a picture of ourselves in this place called Guyana that we have never learned of before, and give us a kind of platform, a footing on which we can understand ourselves and make better of this place, Guyana, and ourselves as individuals.
So until we meet again next month, 4th Sunday, and don't forget our weekly meetings at Barima Avenue, the African Heritage Museum at 5:30 on Thursdays. Until we meet again, we go out of the program reminding you that it's time for us to ring bang the Guyana Reparations story, and closing out saying it's time for
reparations now.
Now.
Ashe.